it's important for me that people understand how important bees are to the economy, to life, you know, in general. And this is the time of year when we celebrate it. A sweet and new year. Or a new year that's sweet.
Hi everybody, it's Rabbi Finn and I'm delighted to introduce this really special video that I made last week with Ian Shenker. For those of you who do not know, Ian Shenker is a member of our community, but he also is a beekeeper. It's been a passion and a hobby of his for many, many years, and every year he produces the most amazing honey from his bees. And I got to spend an enjoyable afternoon with him as he prepared the last batch of his honey to go on sale for this year. In this video, he shows us how he gets the honey, how he produces it, as well as sharing some really interesting facts about bees. I started our conversation off with a simple question because I'm not a huge fan of wasps, and I said to him, Ian, what is the difference between wasps and bees? I hope you enjoy.
Wasps will eat anything, right? They're scavengers. And their Latin name gives you a good idea of what they're called. They're called Vespa vulgaris, which means the common undertaker, right? And they will eat anything. Any dead animal, they'll eat. Anything they can eat, they will. Jam, anything. Bees are only after nectar and honey. And if I spill honey, I've got to either wash it up, so I've got a big bucket of water down there, so I try and keep the place clean because otherwise it gets really sticky. And the basin up here is what I'm doing for the food side of it. All right. So I actually got into beekeeping because when I was a young married man, my wife was forever saying, dig the garden up, plant these things. And I thought, we're spending money on plants and we're getting nothing back out of it. So we started doing a little bit of vegetables. And then I looked in the back of a book and it said bees. And so that's how I got into it. You actually get something back from the bees. So I went along to the local beekeeping association and the chap there said, are you allergic to bees? And I said, I don't know. So he got hold of a bee and stuck it into the back of my hand until it stung me. And he said, oh, you're okay. But since then, I'm now allergic to bees. So if I go into get stung from a bee, I can go into anaphylactic shock. So I have my antihistamine. I even have an EpiPen with me in case I start. Right? And this year I went berserk and I bought a super duper high quality bee suit, which is supposed to be bee proof. It isn't. I got stung on the tummy last week.
Oh.
But it was only not a full sting, it was only a partial sting. But, you know, I look like a spaceman in it and I sweat something awful in it. But I have to be careful. I used to go into town to have desensitization injections, which is bee venom. And they were trying to build me up so I could take 2 bee stings without going into shock. Everything stopped because of Corona. Right. Okay, the bees. The beehive, they're all wild creatures. They're not, you can't tame them. During the summer, the worker bees live 5 weeks. In the winter, they can live 6 months. It's because they've got a little motor on the back that says 600 miles flying time. When you've burnt out your motor, that's it. All right. Inside the beehive, the queen, there is one queen. She controls everything and she controls it with a pheromone. And she produces this pheromone every time she lays an egg. If you think of the pheromone like a packet of sweets and it gets passed down the line and each one takes a little sweet, I've had my sweets today, I'm happy. It's when she stops laying enough eggs to produce enough pheromones, the one at the end, I've not had my sweet today, we're without a queen. Let's make a new queen. The old queen says, hang on a minute, I've got plenty of energy. She pumps out lots of pheromone and swarms, and that's when I get loads. I've had over 25 calls this year. People going, I got bees in my back garden. What do I do? What do I do? And they phone up the council. They phone up Rentokil. As soon as they say they got bees, Rentokil says, we're not allowed to touch them. You have to call a beekeeper. Right? If it's wasps, they'll come out and charge you. If it's bees, they're not allowed to touch. The government have now got the idea that bees are very, very important. Right. So it's said that bees are wild creatures. They're only living in my beehive because it's convenient for them. All they want is a large space that's dry and that they can keep warm. Their body temperature is about 37 degrees. Right? We have boxes like this. This was designed by a Reverend Langstroth about 150 years ago. He noticed that the gaps between the honeycomb was 1/4 of an inch. And being a reverend, a pastor, priest, whatever you want to call him, he didn't like killing God's creatures. So he devised this system where he could pinch the honey without killing the bees. And he patented it. And it's not alone, the patent's long since gone, but the system that he's done is still going over 150 years later, because it's the best way. I also feel that way. I don't want to kill the bees. The old method was you take a straw skep, you have the bees inside the skep, and when you wanted to get the honey, you put it over sulfuric acid and the fumes would kill everything. You scrape everything out, put it in a muslin and squeeze it. Yeah? And out through the muslin would come the honey. Right? What we've got is boxes of frames like this, and it's got, I cheat, I put honeycomb in it, foundation, which is pieces of wax that are embossed with the honeycomb shape, and they draw it out and make it into cells. I've left one so I can show you the extraction, but if you just lift that one up, can you do that? Right. Now lift that one up.
Ooh, that's a lot heavier.
Right. That's roughly about 2 to 3 pounds of honey. All right. What I tend to do, and what all beekeepers tend to do, is they come along and they smoke them. Very tasty. I have to get my big suit on. This is my smoker. I put in cardboard or straw, I set it on fire and just puff smoke over the bees. It confuses them. They think there's a fire. Go into my beehive. What can I save? I can only save the food. Like on a Shabbos afternoon, when I've had a big meal, what do I want to do? Sleep. Same with them. Also, lots of their communication is done by smell, and the smoke confuses them. So they can't give out fear pheromones themselves. Does that make sense?
Mm.
So I actually have boxes like this. The bottom 2 boxes are deeper, and you've got frames like that, and I deliberately make it that the queen can't come up the top because I put a grid above it, and because she's got a big bottom, she can't get through. The workers being a lot smaller, I can't store the honey downstairs because we've got babies downstairs. Let's store it upstairs. So when I come to separate them, all I get is the pure honey, and I haven't killed the babies and I haven't killed the colony. The old-fashioned method was you'd kill the colony and catch another swarm. Yeah? We've got big problems now because we're destroying their habitat, and we're actually poisoning them with pesticides and things like that, and herbicides. So I slap these boxes here because this is the only area that I can actually say is secure to get my don't have to wear a suit. Yeah. You picked up one of these before. You can see this is almost very close to being a show comb of honey. Yeah? Nearly every cell is filled and sealed. That means when they're sealed, that's ripe honey. And that honey is the right consistency that we know it's got a shelf life of over 2,000-3,000 years. We know it. They dug up a pharaoh, and of all the food they left for his afterlife, the wheat, the corn, the barley, it all disintegrated, except the honey. Oh, ask King Tut, he's preserved in it. All right. So how do I do it? We've designed these frames this size so I can fit it into my centrifuge. Right. What I tend to do is I put my frame in there, and this is high tech. High tech. I just break the comb. I break the cells. As you can see, it's high tech. I did the majority of them earlier, so you can just see me doing one. And now if I just turn it upside down, it would drain through gravity. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to put it into my centrifuge so I can have 15 frames clearing out all at the same time. And if I get this done quickly enough and set it up, I'm not bothered about the wax mixing with the honey, because when I put the centrifuge on, it all gets thrown to the side of the container, and through gravity just slowly dribbles down. Does that make sense? Right, let's just... It's interesting because the season of the year, it's Rosh Hashanah soon, and by tradition we have honey to welcome it in a sweet new year. What's interesting is honey is produced by insects. All insects are unkosher. Well, so I asked Rabbi Conway, why is honey kosher? And his answer to me was, it says so in the Torah. Who am I to question the Torah? So they've actually come out with ideas that the honey is the produce of the flowers. The bees collect it, concentrate the nectar, which is a very weak sugar solution, and they concentrate it, remove the water, so it then has a shelf life over 2,000 years. It's their winter supplies. So most insects die come winter, and the virgin queen hibernates. In the case of the honeybee, they go into not hibernation, they go into the winter 40,000 strong, and they survive because they've got this food supply. Unless there's this bloke in a white suit who comes along and pinches it. If that's the case, I have to make sure that the bees survive, so I feed them with a syrup. It's not as good as honey, but as long as they survive. What I tend to do is the brood chambers, which are the two large boxes down below, whatever they have in there, that's theirs. And I weigh it, heft, I'm getting used to it. And as far as I'm concerned, they must have a minimum of 40 pounds of food to survive winter. So if I don't like the weight of it, I pour syrup in a feeder bucket and keep topping it up. And that's the point I also medicate them, because there's various different illnesses that it's not one bee gets it, it's the whole colony gets it, and they all die. So now's the time when it's clear. I've taken off the honey, and I can medicate them as well. I'm just going to if you come closer, you'll be able to see, hopefully, bits of honey and wax being thrown off by centrifugal force to the side. Now, I have to have it all balanced, otherwise it starts walking across the floor. Right? And you can see it's wobbly. I can either do it slowly, at a slow speed, or I can do it at super speed, and then I've got to sit on it to stop it from walking across the floor. I can see it now very clearly being thrown and hitting the side of the tank, which is perfect, and gravity will actually get that to fall down. Does that make sense? It slowly works its way down. I'm going to switch it off. I will do that later. At the end of the day, maybe after the extraction, down in the bottom there's about 1 inch or 2 mixture of wax and honey. I cheat. And out comes the honey with wax in it, and it goes into a filter. All right. Now it takes a long time because I'm not heating it. It usually takes about an hour or so for each filling, and the more wax you get in, the longer it takes. So the wax cappings I often scrape out and melt down and make fresh foundation or candles or all sorts of things I can make from it. The honey drained through a double filter, stainless steel filter. The first one takes out all the wax. The second one so fine, any other rubbish. I can't do it now because I've got the honey going through it. But what I then tend to do is take the bucket and tip it into this tank. If you look inside there, that's pure honey. And that's all I do to it. That's all I do. That is called a settling tank. And all the bubbles just slowly rise to the surface. And then again, high tech, I open the tap at the bottom and out pours my honey. These jars are specially designed with a little rim around there, and when it gets to that rim, I tend to go over that, which is what I've done here. There's your extraction process. Total. Rabbi Conway came round. He's the head of KLBD, and he was very knowledgeable. And he said, "Is that all you do?" And I said, "Yeah." And he saw that I try and keep everything as clean as I can. I don't adulterate it. He asked me questions about feeding it and things like that and medication. And he says, how do you know it's honey and it's not the feed? Because I've taken off all the frames with the honey. That's when I feed them, so it doesn't get into the supers. That's when I medicate it, so the medication doesn't get into the honey. Yeah, I don't heat it. The commercial people do heat it. There's a number of reasons. This is very slow, and if you spent thousands of pounds getting a bottling plant, you don't want it going glug, glug. You don't want it. You want it to go glug, 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 glug. And the only way you can do that is by heating it. The problem is when you heat the honey, you destroy the goodness. The vitamins become denatured. The pollen breaks down. Yeah? If you try to mix two types of honey, for instance, privet honey is so bitter, you just don't want to eat it. On the other hand, you've got honeydew honey, which is so sweet, it will set your teeth on edge. Can I blend them? Like you do blended teas, like you do blended whiskies. Yeah? So you get something that's palatable. You can't do it cold because it's too thick. But if you heat it, it becomes runny, you can mix it. But you've destroyed the goodness. So it's only the small beekeeper who does it cold extraction like this that it still has the goodness. So it's interesting because last week my wife showed me an article from the Metro that the British Medical Journal saying the best thing for cures for colds and coughs is natural honey. Better than any of the other medication, natural honey. So if you go to Tesco and you pick up a jar and it says the word blended from more than one source, as soon as you see the word blended, it must mean that it's heat treated. It's now just flavoured sugar water. For me, that's perfect for cooking, but not for my slice of toast. All right? I'm lucky because once people eat honey, my honey, they don't want to go to Tesco's. I've got no problems with that at all. So that's principally the extraction of the honey. Now, I've got loads of wax left over. So what do I do with it? I can either emboss it, make candles, emboss it, put it back in the frames, because it takes 8 pounds of honey to make 1 pound of wax. So by recycling it, I'm saving a lot. Yeah. I make candles. This is foundation wax, just rolled into this one. This is a model of an old skep, straw basket. This one was done by pouring it into a mould, casting it. I don't have them here, but I did make by dipping. And when I made Havdalah candles, I made tapers, gently warmed them and twisted them together. Oh, I've got a last fraction of honey soap. The honeybee, these are my teaching books. They pollinate the plants. And when you think about it, 1/3 of the food that we consume has to be produced by pollination. Yeah? Of that pollination, 95% of it is done by bees. What are you talking about? Bumblebees, butterfly? Well, there's only one bumblebee, one butterfly here, one butterfly there, and it's only in a certain time of the season. Bumblebees get 200. Wasps, you might get 500. Bees, they go into winter 40,000 strong. They come out ready to work 40,000 strong, getting up to 100,000 strong. So it's statistics, it's numbers, it's a numbers game. The plants have literally come to the conclusion, if you're going to pinch my pollen, can you take it from my flower to that flower? I'll give you a reward. And that's what the nectar is. And they've come kind of like a symbiosis. And in fact, I just learnt that there's a plant in South Africa that it will only be pollinated by the carpenter bee, which is a variety of bee. And as the bee lands on the plant, it changes the notes to the middle C, and it suddenly gets a cloud of pollen over it. So when it goes to the next one, it's covered in. That's why they're hairy. Yeah, I think I've spoken enough about bees.
What's the difference between set honey and runny honey?
All honey is dependent totally on the plant that produces the nectar. Certain of them have, they're all slightly different sugars, varieties of fructose with additions. For instance, oilseed rape gives you a slightly sharper honey. You take it off of the beehive and within 3 days it will set to like rock. It's not gone bad, it's just crystallized. You get something like honeydew honey, which is almost black, and it's got a longer liquid shelf life. The Tesco's honey, by heating the honey, pasteurised, whatever you want to call it, you break down things that will seed off crystallization, and that's all it is. If you take set honey and gently warm it up, it goes back to being liquid, and you eat it. And just don't overheat it. I'm in that case.
And your honey bees, what kind of plants are they feeding from? What kind of honeys are they producing?
Well, it depends where you put your bees. The bee has a little motor on its back that says around about 600 miles flying time. It's the last 2 weeks of their life that they go out shopping, and they fly about 1.5 miles from the beehive and bring it back. The longer the flight, the less flights they can make, because once they've just burnt out their motor, they've done it. So I've got some bees in Totteridge. So it takes in clover, it takes in chestnut, whatever's in the locality. I've got bees in Free Barnet, and there's a big wasteland, about 26 acres of waste. So wild bushes, fruit trees, all sorts of things, lilac, lavender, and the one that I dislike is ivy, because one, it's a bit, it's not as sweet, but it crystallizes very, very quickly, and the bees can't eat it during winter. So this is another reason why I quickly feed them with syrup in summer, so they've got no room to put this rubbish. Does that make sense?
Cool.
It's important for me that people understand how important bees are to the economy, to life, you know, in general. And this is the time of the year when we celebrate it, a sweet and new year, or a new year that's sweet.